I surely can. So it's a novel about a girl called Ada, who is not really a girl and yet distinctly female. It's a novel about desire and agency and power. Those are sort of the broad themes, self-expression, self-direction. And at a plot level, it's about a girl who is living in quite an isolated landscape with her father and has a very particular role to play in relation to a small community nearby. And then she meets a young man called Samson who sort of expands the perimeters of what she had thought was possible about her own life. And she realizes she can't do without him, and her behavior becomes increasingly uncompromising and arguably increasingly disturbing. So a couple of years ago, well, many years ago now, my partner and I were in a place called West Cork, which is very, very southerly in Ireland. And I had this image that came to me sort of out of the blue of a father and a daughter digging a grave for somebody who was not yet dead. And that was sort of, it stayed with me for a very long time. I wasn't writing fiction at the time, so I didn't quite know what to do with this image. And then I was finishing my master's in visual arts practices, and I was reading a lot of Simone de Beauvoir and Julia Kristeva, and I became very fixated on the dense poeticisms that are inside of those texts, like The Second Sex and Black Sun. And it occurred to me, what would all of this language, this dense poetic language, look like if applied to an actual living female body? And how might a female body experience all of that language? And then those kind of questions and concerns sort of flooded that image that I'd had a couple of months ago of this girl and her father performing this strange activity. So that image of Ada and her father digging a grave, it once opened the book. I think now it's sort of 2/3 of the way in. So when I was much younger, I spent a lot of time reading Ernest Hemingway, Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, and I loved their pared back way of saying things and the rhythm that a pared back syntactical style can generate. And then as I got older, I started reading a lot more work in translation. So Delphine de Vigan, Samantha Schweblin, Christina Rivera Garza, I could go on, Banu Kapil, I could go on and on. Predominantly female writers in translation are who I would cite as my most resonant influences right now and who I look to the most for inspiration. I think so, but it was never my intention I didn't sit down and think I'm going to write a feminist book. I think the degree to which it's feminist occurs in the same way to the degree to which it might be magic realist or speculative. I think those sort of bigger kind of genre concerns are quite contingent to the book. And I find that now when I've written novels since, or written short stories, I'll start with an image, or I'll start with a character, or I'll start with a single line. And then the longer I spend inside that world developing it, themes like feminism or genre concerns like magic realism will slowly simmer up to the surface. So yes, I think it is definitely a feminist novel, but it wasn't my intention. I didn't want the novel to feel polemical in any way. So I love horror movies. I've loved horror films since I was very young and probably watched far too many of them far too young before I was able to process them properly. Most recently, I loved Men by Alex Garland. And I love The Brood by David Cronenberg. I love, kind of body horror and that very tactile and mechanical approach to body horror and bodily transfiguration. And then a movie I really loved when I was younger was Ginger Snaps, which is about a young girl, well, two young girls, two sisters, who one of them is slowly becoming a werewolf. And it's very much, the experience of becoming a werewolf is very much on par with female adolescence and all of those bodily changes. So I love horror film because I actually find it very cathartic, and I think it, when done well and done mindfully, gives us a way to express a lot of collective anxiety and to release the kind of negative charge we have behind a lot of negative archetypes. And I just love the feeling of being frightened, of being unhinged. I find that it's a place that, not necessarily being frightened, but being unhinged, or that feeling of the uncanny, is something I really try to channel when I'm writing. I find it really productive. I think possibly a certain orientation towards the English language, in that a lot of Irish writers have, historically we have a complicated relationship to the English language. And I think that in more contemporary terms, Irish authors have a very healthy irreverence that Emer McBride has spoken about in relation to English, and making intentional errors, grammatical or syntactical errors, with a very particular effect in mind. In terms of themes and imagery, people often draw parallels, which I find really interesting and really useful to think about, but they weren't at the forefront of my thinking when I was working on the book. I don't know about a myth maker, but I certainly, when I was writing the book, I very much wanted to write an alternative history or an alternative mythology of female embodiment, and a sort of alternate archetype for the female body and female experiences. So maybe to that extent, yes, but it feels like a very grand, lofty term. I'm not sure if I've earned it yet. Sure. Je suis vraiment content d'être ici à Paris, et j'espère que il y a une audience à France pour cet roman. C'est un roman étrange, mais c'est mon cœur aussi, et j'espère que il y a quelques personnes qui aiment le roman.